How to replace a fuel filter in a 5th generation Honda Accord. 5th generation ran between 94 and 97, so if you have an Accord between those years, this should be exactly what you're looking at. And even if you don't have an older Accord, if you just have an older Honda between the years 92 and 2001, this could very well be the filter that you need. It fits 165 vehicles between those years. And I'll put a link down below in the description to the eBay page where I bought this filter. On that page, there's a list of compatible vehicles, so you can check it there and see if this is the one you need. So even if you don't have an older Accord, if this is the filter that you need, keep watching because the procedure to replace it should be the same. The only difference is going to be where the filter is located on your car. Here's how the repair went on my 95 Accord LX. The fuel filter is located in the engine compartment on the driver's side underneath the master cylinder. I put an orange piece of duct tape on the 17mm banjo bolt that's on top of the filter. That bolt has to come out, and there's also a 14mm fitting on the underside of the filter that has to come off. So obviously to get that one off on the bottom, you have to get underneath the car. Last night I sprayed PB Blaster penetrating oil on both of the bolts, top and bottom. And hopefully that penetrating oil is going to help those bolts break loose because this is the original filter for this car. It's been on there for 26 years. First thing I'm going to do is break the 17mm banjo bolt loose on top of the old filter. And at the same time, I'm going to slide a 19mm crowfoot wrench. I'm going to slide that over to hold the filter in place while I break the banjo bolt loose. Pretty much the same thing on the underside. 19mm crowfoot wrench to hold the filter in place. And then a 14mm flared crowfoot wrench to break the fitting loose. And why am I using a flared 14mm crow's foot as opposed to a standard 14mm crow's foot? Because there's less of a chance of stripping out that fitting on the underside of the filter if you use a flared crow's foot. In the flared, you can see the angles cut into it as opposed to the standard. It's just kind of rounded. And where the filter is located on my car, stripping out that fitting on the bottom is the last thing I want to do. And the extension setups that I'm using to reach the filter are 15.5 and 14 inches long. It looks like I have a straight shot to that 17mm banjo bolt, but this bracket for the power steering high pressure line, that gets in the way. It kicks it to the side just a little bit, just enough to keep that socket from sliding all the way onto the banjo bolt. So I'm going to have to take this bracket loose. That hasn't been off in 26 years. And of course it fell, but it went all the way through. I heard it hit the floor. Taking that bracket loose does give me a straighter shot at that banjo bolt. Now that 17mm socket will slide all the way onto the bolt. And what I'm going to do first, before I put that crow's foot wrench on there, I'm going to slide a breaker bar onto my ratchet. And I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure just to see if it'll break loose or see if we're really bending that bracket. I'm putting a lot of pressure on that. But the bracket doesn't seem to be bending, so that's a good thing. Let me put some more muscle behind it. As you saw, that banjo bolt broke loose without having to hold it with the crowfoot wrench. And the bracket seemed to hold it very securely. So if it held it securely from the top, from the underside, it should be the same thing, right? We'll see. Hopefully we won't need 2 wrenches down there. I'm going to get that banjo bolt out. And you'll notice one crush washer right there and another crush washer here stuck to the filter. We're going to replace both of those crush washers because the new filter came with 2 new ones. But just remember that you need 1 crush washer on either side of this fitting. Don't forget those because if you do, it's going to leak. Now it's time to get under the car and break it loose at the bottom of the filter. Before you get under your car, make sure it's supported by jack stands and wear some type of safety glasses because you're subject to have gasoline or who knows what falling on you. Just to give you a reference as to where that access hole is, where you can see the underside of the filter, that's the back side of my driver's tire. And the access hole is right there. There's the underside of the fuel filter. Now I need to get that 14mm flared crowfoot wrench over the fitting, and I think that's it right there. Yeah, that's it. It's on it. All right, now I need to get the ratchet on the extension. And now the cheater bar on the ratchet. Let me see if I can see how much that fuel filter is twisting. Hopefully that fitting is going to break free. Whoop, that's in the way. There we go. All right. There's the gasoline dripping out, so that worked. This is what we heard fall when it broke loose. It was just a crush washer that was stuck on top of the filter. So now with the fitting broken loose underneath, I'm going to go back up top and try to reach underneath the filter to unscrew it the rest of the way. Now the question is, how do you get your arm down there? If you got big arms and big hands, you're probably not going to be able to do this. I got my hand on it. It is turning little by little. It doesn't want to turn anymore, but it's not all the way out. Oh man. I'm gonna take a break from that for now and disconnect the bracket from the frame of the car. And I'm gonna be taking that 10mm bolt off. Here's the best way that I found to reach that bolt. My arm's coming in from the front, underneath the master cylinder, and I have the shortest box end 10mm wrench that I have, and I'm able to turn it about 1/4 of a turn at a time. But it's working slowly. Now getting it back on there, getting that bolt started back in there, that's gonna be tricky. All right, there it is. Now with the filter bracket loose from the body of the car, rather than trying to undo the fuel line, I should be able to twist the filter off of the line. And that's it, it's loose. So now, how do I get it out of there? All right, I think I got it without taking it out of the bracket. Yep, there we go. All right, when I got that filter out, it was right at dinner time, so I went inside, had dinner, came back out, and I see that the fuel is still leaking. And has been the whole time I was inside. So I'm gonna see if taking the fuel cap off will take pressure off of the fuel tank system, which it just did. I heard air escaping. Hopefully that should stop the leaking. It's only been a couple of minutes and no more leaks. So taking that fuel cap off and relieving the pressure on the fuel tank and the fuel system, that did stop the leak. So that's something you need to think about. Luckily, I came back out here. Well, I almost screwed that up. I did screw it up a little bit, but I can fix it. I'm bending the bracket out now to where it should be. This was bent way up in that direction. The nut on top of the filter, you can see how much that's leaning, how much it got bent that way. That's because I took the easy route. I did not use the 19mm crow's foot to hold the filter in place, while I used the 14mm flared crow's foot to break that fitting loose. Now, I did look up there after I had the 14mm on and I twisted it and the filter really didn't move that much. So I thought I was good. I thought this was secure enough from the underside, just like it was secure enough from the top to break the banjo bolt loose. But I bent the bracket, I bent the filter. This I can fix, this I'm throwing away, no big deal. But you can avoid that problem from underneath by using both wrenches. And why is it necessary to take the bracket off the car? Because both of these bolts hold the bracket together. You can't just leave this one attached to the car and take this one off thinking that the bracket's going to come apart. You have to take both bolts out so that you can get the bracket apart and get the old filter out. And when you're installing the new filter into the bracket, this little piece fits through that hole just like that. And you squeeze the bracket together and reinstall this bolt. And when you're putting that new filter back in, before you bolt it down to the frame on this side, make sure over here that that little arm, there's a little slit in the body of the car that slides into, and that holds it secure at the bottom. And then this presses up against the body of the car and you bolt it in. I'm gonna get the new filter and bracket assembly back down in there the same way it came out, which was back through here. And there's no perfect way to do it. You just have to keep twisting it until you get it to clear everything. And if your new filter has those protective caps to protect the threads, don't forget to take that off. And now I am first gonna attach that fuel line to the bottom of the filter before I bolt that bracket back in. Doing it that way will allow me to move the filter around to get it lined up, because if I bolt it down first, I won't be able to move the filter around and it'll be harder to line up those threads. And I gotta reposition my arm through here to reach the bottom of the filter. I got the thread started. Now I have that 14mm fitting as tight as I can get it by hand, and I'll finish up tightening it from underneath. Now I'm gonna try to reattach that bracket, putting that arm on the other side, sliding it into that slot, which is right there, and it wants to pop back out, so I'm gonna have to somehow get my other hand down in there to hold it in place. Oh man, how's this gonna work? This is just a ridiculous design. Why in God's name would you put a filter down there? I'll come back when I got that bolt started. All right, I got the bracket bolt started and I'm getting my hand down there from the front underneath the master cylinder. There's the bolt. I can get my box end wrench on it, 10mm, and I can turn it about 1/4 of a turn at a time. So I am getting it tight. It's just taking a little while. That's how you may be able to reach it also. Just don't forget the crush washers, one on each side of this fitting. You can see I have one on the banjo bolt. So I'm just sliding that bolt through the fitting, just like that. Now, the trick is getting the other crush washer to the underside of that bolt without dropping it. Because if you drop that crush washer, it's made out of aluminum. And if you have a magnetic pickup tool, that's not going to do you any good, because that magnet is not going to work on the aluminum washer. Now, I got to block you. I got to put my hand down in there. And I know I just knocked the camera to the side, but I can't screw this up. I can't drop that crush washer. I have a crush washer on either side of the fitting, and I have the banjo bolt threaded in a little bit. I'm going to get it as tight as I can by hand. Then I'm going to use that 19mm crowfoot wrench to hold the filter in place, and the 17mm socket to tighten this down all the way. I'm gonna do it the way I should have done it before. And when you put that fuel line back on top of the filter, make sure that metal section of the fuel line comes in from the top between those two prongs. In order to get that 19mm crowfoot on the filter, I had to come in from this side on the right side. Right there. So that will hold the filter in place. And now the 17mm on the banjo bolt. Now I'm getting that banjo bolt as tight as I can. And that's it right there. So now let's get under the car and tighten down the 14mm fitting. Here we are back under the car, and I'm going to use 2 wrenches to tighten up that 14mm fitting. I'm working the 19mm crow's foot up there now to put that on the filter, and that's going to fit there. That just slid on from the right side. Now let me figure out how to hold this in place while I put the 14mm flared crow's foot on the fitting. I'm going to have to work that in coming in from the left side. And that's it right there. And if I had done it this way using 2 wrenches when I broke that fitting loose, I would not have bent the bracket and I would not have bent the filter. You're not going to see me tightening this from this view. I'm going to have to back the camera up because I don't have any way to set up the camera and hold 2 wrenches at the same time. So you'll see a view from back behind me while I'm tightening these up. Whew. All right, that's as tight as I can get it. I'm done. And now the last thing to do before I test it for leaks is to put the bracket back on right here, the one for the high pressure power steering line. All right, that's it. Time to crank it up, check it for leaks. Before I prime the fuel pump and start up the car, I put a fresh piece of cardboard, clean cardboard, right underneath where the fuel filter is. So if any fuel leaks out, we will see it on the cardboard. Before I start the car, I'm going to turn the ignition on. Going to do that 4 or 5 times because every time I do it, it primes the fuel pump. I can hear it running. You probably can't. When the check engine light is on, fuel pump is priming. When the light goes off, the fuel pump is shut off. So that's 3, 4. Let's do it one more time. All right, now let's try to start it. Let's go look for leaks. Dry up top. And dry underneath. Everything looks good. All right. Runs good and no leaks. I just filled it up with fresh gas, shook it up a little bit, and look at all the dirt that's coming out. 26 years and 141,000 miles worth of dirt. And here's a cutaway and a clean paper towel to show you how nasty those pleats are. I'm going to push it down in between. And look at that dirt. It's amazing gas was even making it through there. Long overdue to be changed, but now we're good. Look down below in the description for 3 links. One to the 14mm flared crowfoot wrench that I bought just for this job. One to the genuine Honda filter used in the video. And another link to the video that showed me how to do this, posted by a guy who goes by the name Bujo. Look for those links below. Thanks for watching. Why in God's name would you put a filter down there? Something that gets replaced, you know, something that you replace under normal maintenance. Why in God's name would you hide it way down here? Except to force people not to do it themselves and have to take your car to the dealership. That's why they did it.